Well, welcome you all to this recorded presentation of the One Planet City Challenge and how to optimize your interim feedback report. And all participants of the One Planet City Challenge should have received yesterday or today your city's own OPCC feedback report. And we are here today to get a deep dive into all about this feedback report and how it is done and what to think about and how you can optimize and correct and amend the report so that you can benefit the most from your reporting and your participation in this challenge. And I who speak is Björn Sigurdsson. I'm Senior Advisor to WWF and the One Planet City Challenge. And with me is Tabaré Kuras, and you are?
I'm the technical lead of the One Planet City Challenge, and I'm also a cities expert within the WWF Cities team. Nice to see you, Björn, and nice to see everyone in this call.
Brilliant. There is some 270 cities participating this year. How is it possible that every city get each their own feedback report? How is that done?
I could summarize it in two words. I would say panda magic. We actually have some magic tricks, automated magic tricks, to be more precise, that allow us with some sophisticated tools analyze the information that all of our participants have submitted to the CDP EK Unified Reporting System. So basically, we have some programming tools that allow us to assess all these cities. And let me tell you something, Björn. This is not the first time we do this. We have done it already for a previous cycle. And as you rightly pointed out, we have over 270 cities in this challenge. Last time we had over 250. So every year since 10 years ago, our challenge has been moving forward. More participants have been joining the initiative, and we have been creating more tools and better tools to assess all the information that our participants submit to this particular and exciting competition.
Right. So I guess that we are all together, the cities and the WWF, on a joint journey to improve and learn from each other how to assess our plans and be more precise on actions and targets to solve the climate crisis. Today, it's good to have your feedback report. If you don't have it, there is one on the panda.org/OPCC web page to a template that you can download. The magic behind this, or the methodology behind the feedback report, is noted in updated assessment framework, which you also can download. So anything that we say here today, Tabaré, and specifically what you say, you can also find the basics of in this methodology, the technical document updated. So with no further ado, let's deep dive into and give some examples of how to understand and what to think about when it comes to your report and your feedback report.
Excellent.
So I understand that you wanted to start on page 7. Why should we start on page 7 with these 7 levers of change?
That's a good one, and I want to tell that to the OPC participants that our overall framework includes a qualitative and a quantitative assessment of the responses. With this evaluation framework, we basically do two things. We evaluate the level of vision that your city has in terms of the climate performance they want to have, and also the actual potential to reduce hazards and GHG emissions, which is our impact. So we measure vision and impact. And the way we measure is basically through these 7 levers of change. The 7 levers of change.
Okay, let's have a look at them here.
Those ones, exactly. The 7 levers of change are the indicators, the macro indicators that we use to evaluate the performance of the cities. So Björn, what we do with these 7 levers of change is we identify best practices, but at the same time, we establish the reference baseline for the evaluation.
Okay. So there's a lot of criteria, and how these numbers in blue you see below, what are these? How do you get to the, how do you actually evaluate and get this percentage that are presented in each lever?
So each of these levers, it is somehow pillaring the overall performance of your city, which is reflected on the responses that you give to each of the questions of the Unified Reporting System CDP ECLAY questionnaire. So what we're seeing on the screen at the moment in these blue balls are the connection between the topics that we evaluate and precisely the where we extract the information. So to give you an example, we evaluate mitigation targets based on the responses that you provide on your questionnaire, questions 5, 8, and 8.5. We do the same with adaptation actions, for instance, by evaluating your responses, your submitted publicly to the database responses in questions 3.0, 3.2, 3.2a. So each of these levers evaluate a specific section of the questions. If you recall in your questionnaire, you have different spaces to provide information on each of these questions. So that's how we evaluate them.
So that is so every question that is put in the unified reporting system has a purpose. It gives information for this evaluation of the 7 levers. And what I understand, which question that belongs to what levers and what questions answer to what is transparently listed in the technical document, so that it's there for everybody to see and think for themselves how to use this information. How do you get these 100% and 71% and 0%? Shall we look at the what's behind the percentages in what I understand this overall criteria table?
Yes, so this is also very important, and it's really worth highlighting. So our overall framework consisted in structure in 150 points. So that means that if you have the best performance, you will get 150 points. Now, what you see in the several levers, what you see in your report is the answers that are standardized to the unity. So that means what you're actually seeing is the percentage of completion of each of your categories. But the important thing here is to recognize that each of these leverages, these 7 indicators, have a different weight. So we do not weight them all equally. And that's what we're seeing in this screen. So each of these sections have different number of points. So for example, political commitment scores 5 points, the maximum. Mitigation target scores 39 points, the maximum. And this somehow reflects this level of vision and commitment and impact that a city can have in their performance. To some extent, the weight that we attribute to each of the categories is a reflection of how hard and how much impact or how much vision that indicator is consisted of. So that's why each of these categories, when you see in your report different valuations of the indicators, does not mean that they are contributing equally to your average score. They have different percentages, and they are all standardized to the unity. So you will not see 24 points. You will see 100% completion, 50% completion, etc.
Right, and so from the table here, we can see that, of course, mitigation targets and mitigation actions are, of course, the most important things, because we need to do something very concrete to handle the climate crisis and stop emissions and so on. So, of course, that is most heavily weighted in the total scoring, although all 7 levers, all 7 criteria here is important as a whole.
Exactly. I think that's a very good message to highlight in here, Bjorn. We need to see the overall score that you get as an integrity. So certainly some indicators have better weight and more weight, but what you need to recognize is the overall integrity of your evaluation framework. And that's an important thing. So with this, if you see, for example, 0% adaptation target, might not necessarily say that you're doing bad. It might give you a direction of where is the opportunity for you to improve, to do better. And I think that's the key message. These indicators show us where is the opportunity, where are the gaps to be better in climate action, better in climate planning.
So you need to read this page 7 in your feedback report together with the technical document and this overall scoring board that we just show you to get to understand what the figures means and so on.
Exactly. Let me just highlight another thing, Bjorn, if we can come back to the next page. We have, so far we have said that each of these indicators has a different weight. But I want to bring to your attention, Bjorn, that within each of these indicators, we also have several categories. So to say, we have sub-indicators. And those sub-indicators are also weighted in different manners. So maybe we have an example to display.
Yeah, absolutely. So below this summarizing table, there is how this table is made up. And here is an excerpt from the total table. What I understand is the lever for mitigation targets is not all of the mitigation target sub-indicator scoring, but just a bit of it. Please, what do we see here? How should I read and understand this?
This is an excellent snapshot. I will tell you why I think it's an excellent one. First of all, what we see on the left corner is the aggregate standardized value for this particular example of a mitigation target indicator. So this person got, or sorry, this city got 59%, which means that this indicator is particularly consisted of 39 points. What we are seeing on the screen is 3 of the 4 sub-indicators, which in average give us 30 points, but this particular category consists of 39 points. Anyway, so mitigation targets got 59%, which means that probably I'm not that good with math, but I would reckon that this is about 20 something points. That
23, 25 maybe.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. But how those 23 have been achieved by this city? And I want to give the illustration of my previous comment about the differentiated weights within categories with the renewable energy electricity. Quite often we get a question from the city saying like, well, you know, I have reported my renewable energy targets, but I still don't get 100%. Why is that? Well, because we have conditions within our subcategory that also provide different scores. So for example, if you have renewable energy targets, it's great, but it's not enough. What we need is renewable energy targets that are compatible with that level of ambition. That's why if you are looking for 25% renewable energy in overall city energy sector, you will get 1 point. If you go instead for 100% renewable energy, you will get 2.5 points. And that's how we score this particular category. I give you another example. What about if my city does not speak about total renewable energy, so not final energy consumption, but only electricity? Well, you also get awarded with points if you only disclose targets with electricity, but those will be comparatively less weighted that if you talk about an overall energy system. So for example, if you get 100% renewable electricity only, you will be getting 1.25 points in your average score. So that's how we basically, with this illustration, describe the way we constitute sub-indicators. And this happens with all of the 30 plus indicators, sub-indicators that we use to evaluate your framework. We could quickly go over the first one, the GHG targets alignment to trajectory. If your target aligns to 2030, you will get 10 points. If your target aligns also with 2050, you will get 20 points. So in summary, we do not only have different weights for different indicators for the 7 levers, but we also have different weights at sub-indicator level.
Right. So this is and this is one excerpt from the technical document. So after this seminar, everybody can of course download the the documentation and read for themselves every sub-indicator indicator to understand how the feedback is assessed, how the reporting is assessed. And of course, what I understand is that it's not only about the reporting, but it's also about ambition and the targets that you have. And it's not only the climate emission targets, but it's also about energy targets, of course, for example, but also other things.
Exactly.
Right. Shall we move on to see?
Yeah.
So this is the general ID and the overall scoring and the overall feedback of your city's work. The report that you get is on several pages, some 14, 15 pages and so on. And we just talked about page 7. Page 6, your city's fair share of the Paris Agreement or science-based targets alignment to 1.5 degrees the most.
Very important one.
Right. So let's see what you get on page 6. And you get either something that looks with thumbs up in the upper right corner, or you get thumbs down, and that's when you don't get anything. And Tabaret, explain us what is the base of the questions and what do this graph show, and what do you want to do with this?
Yes. So at first, we need to say that OPCC, we developed a method to measure the level of your GHG reduction targets, to measure the alignment with the Paris Agreement. We have implemented this since 2019. This is a method that has been recognized by the Science Based Target Network, and it is one of the common and most popular methods used in order to derive or to assess, to check the compatibility with this Paris Agreement. So having said that, what we're doing here with a specific method is two things. We look for alignment in the long term towards neutrality. We know that a precondition to be successful in limiting global temperature mean rise to less than 2 degrees, particularly to 1.5 degrees, we need to reach a neutrality by 2050. And that's the first indicator that we measure in here. But because we do not only care about the long term, but we need concrete and specific signs in the short and medium term, we also have we also measure how your targets align to a fair share distribution of the reduction by 2030. So this is what this graph is trying to guide you. Which are the targets, science-based targets, that you should have at minimum, and how they compare with the ones that you have reported. So we do two things in here.
Okay, wait, hang on. Let me see if I got this. It is important to have a midterm target for 2030. That need to be at least half. Global emissions need to be halved. And here is the fair share that you will explain to us shortly. And then WWF is pointing out net zero at 2050, the latest, right? So all targets are evaluated against this. So you need a midterm and a long term.
Exactly.
Right. And what I understand is that you also need to put in your population. Do a city need to put in their forecast for population, or is that something that this magic tool points out? Or
that's a good one, because what we are actually, and you can see it in the graph, we are measuring reductions in per capita emissions. That's part of our method, which, by the way, it is also described in the updated framework that you have pointed out at the beginning of this seminar. So all the details of the method are described in there. But it is very important for us to get at least a couple of parameters in order to estimate what will be your fair share. So we need your population, current and projected. We also need your baseline emissions. If we don't know where your emissions stand, it is for us impossible to detect whether they're fair or not in the reduction trajectory. And we also need to know what's your target and the expected emissions reductions that you will have. All that information is basically contained in the questions of the CDP questionnaire. 0.5 with it is the population prognosis, the population current and projected. 4.6, which is your inventory. So if you don't have an inventory, if you have an inventory, we can use that information to establish the baseline. If you don't have an inventory, then you can disclose your year emissions on question 5.0, where you also describe your targets. So if you fill these questions, then we can estimate the graph. What happens when you see your report, Bjorn, and you see the gray thing? Well, if you get that no emissions target data available, it's because very likely you have missed one of these important parameters that we need in order to estimate your emissions. So it could be very common, very common. You forgot to give us a baseline. So you put your target, you say how much you're expecting to reduce, but you have not given us a baseline. So we don't know what is your current emissions, or you have not given us the population prognosis. We cannot estimate long-term per capita emissions if we don't know what's your population in 20 years, in 30 years. So it is important that as much as possible, you make sure in this amended period that you have responded as much as possible to all the questions, all the sub-questions included in 0.5, 4.6, and 5.0.
All right. So that is the centerpiece of this. So you need to fill in, but what if there also might be the case that you don't have a target, you are in the progress of establishing a target or taking a political decision on a target. So what can you do then?
Well, that's also very important. If you're in the process of generating a target, you can still report it. The questionnaire will allows you to put in the comment section, in the further information section, each of the questions of the questionnaire allows you to include text describing your limitations. In fact, this particular question, 5.0, allows you to define whether your target is established, whether your target has been implemented, or where your target is under revision. So the important thing is that you give us that information, that you tell us the status of your target, but you also describe your target. And I said, this is a very good question, Bjorn, because some cases, there are cities that say, well, we don't have a target yet, we are defining it. We know what will be the value, but we simply don't have it in place. That doesn't matter. Just if you include that information, then we can tell you that serves to guide you if that target you're planning to implement, it is a good one or a bad one. So if you see this graph, then you will see, you
get a feedback on that. So that is good. But if you don't have a target and if you're not in the progress of taking, well, the bottom line is, of course, that you have to go back home to your organization and your political level and say, well, in order to make progress in our climate work and see that we are on track for the 1.5 degree target, we need to establish a target in figures. So that you need to go back and come back. And I understand that well, there is this amendment period that will extend for circa 2 months, and that might be a short time for have a political decision on a target. But all cities are, of course, welcome back in the next round of the One Planet City Challenge, as this is a biannual friendly competition or review. Can you please, we talked about fair share. What is the fair share in this? How does that work?
Yeah, in our method, we have two indicators to account for that fairness. The first one is that we have a distinction. That's why a distinction in terms of emissions in bigger country, in bigger cities and smaller cities. And that's why we use a per capita indicator to recognize that some cities have a major population, which could drive into more emissions. But also we have included a differentiation based on Human Development Index at city level that try to recognize the different stages of development. So it's not only about many people or few people, it's also about the status quo of the development, the structural development of a city. So all the targets are differentiated, and that's why they are tailor-made for cities. So those diamonds in white that you will see in the graph are the recommended science-based target by 2030, and by 2050. 2050 is easy because it needs to be zero, but by 2030 that you should aim at your city, okay? So the fairness is per capita emissions, and is related to per capita emissions, and also the development level of your city.
Okay, fine. So I live in Sweden. What is the typical fairness and a percentage adjustment for a city in Sweden or Denmark, or something like that?
Yeah, for a city in the Nordic, probably is about 60 to 70% reduction of per capita emissions as compared to 2018. And if you ask me the same question for a developing country, developing city, probably this figure will be 35 to 40%, something like that.
Okay, so that it's a division on for the fairness of an international common work that we have as cities, as nations, and so on. Let's see if I had another question here. There is a lot of many cities has the target not in figures, not in numbers, but in wording, like fossil fuel free or climate neutral or things like that. If you have a target like that, what do you need to do in order to get thumbs up and actually have a graph and so on?
The questionnaire allows you to describe this information in qualitative and quantitative terms.
All right.
It is important that you select the option that fits better to the description of your target. Question 5.0 allows you to define your targets in terms of relative, absolute, intensity targets, or fixed values. So depending on the response that you give us in there, as long as you have provided all the information that we're required to do the calculation, you will do it. You will get it. Now, if you have a particular, like let's say, semantical description of your target, for us to translate that into a numerical value, well, we need to have an indication. So it is always important that you give us at least that information that it is constituted in questions 0.5, 4.6, and 5.0 in terms of your baseline of emissions and the expected value that you will reach. And that will allow us to make a quantitative assessment. Otherwise, it will be difficult because, as I said at the beginning, we have a magic tool, but that magic tool is a computerized and automatized program. It's not that we have many tabares doing the assessment city by city. So it is important that you give us the right information for us to give you the right feedback.
But it seems to me that the best, if you can, would be to yourself translate the semantic target or the target in words into something like a number and figure. That will definitely get you on track and get the feedback on this page, right?
Thumbs up. Thumbs up.
All right. Thumbs up for that. Let's move on and see another page in the your feedback report as a city. And that is page 9, your sectoral emissions and their planned abatement. That is the mitigation of mitigation actions and how to bring down your emissions. And then on a sectoral level. This looks like this, that if you look on the upper right side of the page here, the slide, if you have provided figures and numbers, you will get this colorful 2 double circle and thumbs up from Tabaré. If there is no emissions, there is nothing to compare your mitigation action towards, as I understand it. And then you unfortunately don't get a feedback. So what you can do here is, of course, that you can go back and do your calculation, or try to do some calculations to get a feedback, some colorful rings in the final report from OPCC. Yeah. Can you, what do we see in the circles? How do they work?
So in here we see 2 important things. The first one is your inventories. So the emissions per sector that you have in your city. That of course, our magic tool cannot create it. If you don't provide information of your inventories, we can't assess what is the distribution of your emissions per sector. And that's why you get that no inventory data available message. So first thing is important to have your inventories. If you don't have your inventories, you will not be punished in your evaluation, but of course you will not score as high as the cities that have developed an inventory. So that's an important one. Now, what happens when you have your inventory? When you have your inventory, we can see clearly which are the sectors that contribute the most to the overall emissions of your city. Now,
so in this case, transport emissions, the green one is the largest, and then building emissions.
Exactly. So
right.
in the outer ring, what we see is the distribution of your emissions per sector. Now we're going to compare that with your abatement potential. And this is the
right.
key in this question, question 5.4. 5.4 in the questionnaire invites you to describe actions, but those actions, despite good, should be quantified. If we have actions, but we do not know what's the potential abatement of those actions might not be so good as we thought. And that's what we try to reflect with the inner ring. Depending on the quantifiable emission reductions that your actions come with, we can compare this at your sector level. So if we look at this example, the building sectors in yellow in the outer ring show us about 30% of the total emissions of this city. And we see that this city has provided mitigation actions in the building sector that are almost compatible to those 30% emissions. So that being said, this city looks like it's providing lots of mitigation actions for the building sector and also are quantifying those actions. Now let's have an opposite example. Let's look, for example, at emissions in the industry sector, that it is kind of reddish, pinkish. We see that that accounts about 15, what it is, like 10%, 5% of the total emissions of this city. But then we see the inner ring completely white. And that means two things. It could be the case that this city has reported a lot of actions in industry, but none of them is quantified, or this city simply has no actions that reduce emissions in the industry sector. So that's how we read. Outer ring shows us the emissions in your sectors. Inner ring shows the reductions that you think you will achieve with your actions.
Right. So brilliant, and I think it's a very visually very attractive way of visualizing your emissions and your action plan to, and very, you get a very nice overview how you're doing, and are you actually doing mitigation actions on the emissions that counts, on the major emissions, of course. All right, very
Full
good
credit,
page.
let me say full credit to our comms and design team that have put quite a lot of effort this year in making this report more beautiful. So I hope the OPC participants like it, because we're not trying only to give you feedback, but also try to make it clearly, and also that you enjoy, that you really get excited about knowing not what are your gaps, but what are the opportunities for you to do better in your climate performance, in your climate reporting.
Right, and help to progress in your climate work, and to have a material that you can show to the political level, to the management, government, and anybody, or the public, in an easy way to see, this is where we stand today. We need to do better, of course. We all need to every time do better, but this is where we stand today, and maybe you can help in that kind of presentation you can have. So we are coming to the end of our deep dive, and this was more of highlighting some important pages and some give an example of how does it work, well, what is behind this report, what is the figures and how is it done. As a roundup, we can also say show that there are the other pages in the report. There is one page 10, potential actions by sector, and 12. Here we go into the climate adaptation, the risks, the hazards, and the actions. Also here is give some examples of actions that could be taken by a similar city to you that other cities are taking. And finally, as you talked about in the beginning, the vision and impact of your city as a whole, also a way to get an overall picture of where you stand. And here you also get a national comparison. How is that? How does that work as a final explanation on this report?
So page 8 shows us how your city compares to other cities in your country in terms of this macro aggregation of indicators of the vision and impact. So what we do is we collect the overall assessment of all of the cities that participate in your country, and then we plot them. And I think this is a very useful picture. You will see your city, how it stands against the other. You won't know which are the other cities. But if you really want to catch up with the top performers, then you will clearly understand where is your potential opportunity of improvement, whether it is a vision matter, it is an impact matter, and where you should direct. What we hope to see is that in the near future, as soon as possible, because we are under a climate emergency, that you go towards the really top right of the graph, which means that you have the highest potential for impact and the highest potential for vision in terms of the criteria that we are evaluating in this OPCC updated assessment 2021.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Tabri. We do hope that this interim and then the final report and your amendments will help us all to progress towards a better impact in general of this. So thank you very much. Thank you, Tabri. You're the man behind OPCC Help Desk. And thanks a lot for explaining this for the participants in the One Planet City Challenge.
My pleasure, Bjorn. Please, dear CT contestants, if you have any question, feel free to write us at OPCC Help Desk, WWFSE. We will try to respond to you as quick as possible. And do not forget to check our updated assessment framework material, because that will guide you substantially on how to understand further your evaluation. So thanks, Bjorn. Have a lovely day.
The same to you, Tabri, and thank you very much for explaining this.
Ciao.
Ciao.